I'd like to call to order the Proctor City Council meeting for Monday, July 6th. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perform a roll call at this time. Councilor Benson?
Present.
Councilor Peterson?
Present.
Councilor Johnson?
Present.
Councilor DeWall?
Present.
Mayor Ward is also in attendance. Please let the minutes reflect all others in attendance, including Attorney Henke, Administrative Assistant Mizuko, and Administrator Rich, and Sergeant Lee Masters. Looking for a motion to approve the pre-agenda minutes from June 15th, 2026.
So moved.
Councilor Benson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to approve the City Council meeting minutes from June 15th, 2026.
So moved.
Councilor Peterson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Before making that motion, I'd like to do a couple additions, adding 6D IRRB resolution and 6E resolution 19-26 appointing election judges. With those changes, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda? I'll make the motion to approve tonight's agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to comments and suggestions from the citizens present or anyone watching from home. The City of Proctor welcomes everyone to tonight's meeting. The council will now open the public comment suggestion period of the meeting. This is a time set aside for members of the public, whether here in person or watching from home, to address the council on matters related to city business. Each speaker will be granted up to 3 minutes, and before you begin, please state your name and city where you reside for the record. If you're here representing an organization or the media, you're welcome to include that as well if you'd like. The council will listen to all comments, though we are not required to respond or take action during this portion of the meeting. Recording and photography are welcome, provided they don't disrupt the meeting or prevent others from being heard. All speakers are expected to maintain decorum and respect. Obscene, profane, threatening, or disruptive language or behavior will not be allowed. Anyone who continues to disrupt the meeting after a warning may be asked to leave or be removed under the presiding officer's authority to preserve order at this meeting as provided by Minnesota State Statute Section 412.191, Subdivision 2, and Chapter 31 of the Proctor City Code. Once the public comment and suggestion period concludes, the council will move on with the agenda and no further public input will be taken unless recognized by the mayor. If you'd like to speak, please come forward to the podium or dial 218-628-6268 to participate remotely, and we'll pause for about a minute to give everyone a chance to join us.
Or we could just go right to the audience.
Do they have questions? You guys want to say anything? Not yet? You might in a little bit once Vic Lund speaks. All right, hearing no comments, we'll move on. Looking for a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
So moved.
Councilor Johnson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Peterson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 4A, LMC Clerk Advises Council, LMC Grant Navigation Program Award. Administrator Rich.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to report that the City of Proctor was successful in getting a $5,000 grant from the League of Minnesota Cities. We applied for this grant to help us with finding additional grants and funding for the Munger Trail extension. So SEH will be our consultant on that with their grant team, and it'll be a continued effort to help pay for those costs.
Awesome. Council have any discussion on that? Hearing none, thank you. Good work on that. It's always nice receiving grant money. So nice job. Yeah. All right, moving on to 4B, St. Louis County CSAH 11 improvements in quiet zone. Vic Lund, St. Louis County.
Good evening, council members. I'm going to pass out some paraphernalia.
Yes.
Not for all the council members, plus.
The kind you need to test.
Yeah, we need a test.
I don't think so. I'll just wait for you to go to the next slide.
Yeah, I just want to make sure to, okay.
Perfect. So appreciate the time this evening to talk about, give an update on the CASA 11 corridor through the city of Proctor. This presentation is basically bouncing off from some previous discussions that we've had between the city, the county, MnDOT, and the railroad regarding the railroad quiet zone. If we go to the next slide. But we're going to talk at a much higher level tonight because it really isn't, that's certainly a discussion item, but this is a much larger picture to discuss. So this is the CASA 11 corridor through the city of Proctor. You can see the solid line is the section that we're looking at a future project, and the dotted line is the CASA 11 corridor extended back west to the city, through the city to the west. Ultimately, CASA 11 ends at Midway Road, so CASA 13, and then it ends at Boundary Avenue. So if you go to the next slide, a couple things about CASA 11 in the city. There's three components, three segments: 4th Street, beginning at Ugsted Road and ending at 5th Avenue. 5th Avenue beginning at 4th Street, going down to 2nd Street, and then 2nd Street from 5th Avenue over to Boundary Avenue. There is a rail crossing, as everyone is familiar with. That crossing, according to the FRA inventory report, has 8 trains per day. 4 trains are recorded 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., so basically daytime hours, and then conversely at the evening time, and then 2 estimated switching trains per day. Keep in mind, these are estimated numbers, so that operation could fluctuate based upon day-to-day conditions from the CN Railroad. And then, of course, there's US 2, which is controlled by a traffic signal, and I'm sure the city is aware that MnDOT is planning the resurfacing project on Highway 2 in 2027. St. Louis County is a partner to that project. We're doing significant improvements on some county approaches on US 2 through the city of Proctor, mostly pedestrian focused. But the MnDOT has some other pedestrian improvements as well as the resurfacing of Highway 2. Go to the next slide. So to kind of couch this discussion, by way of reminder, there was a Proctor Transportation Plan completed by the MIC here in 2021, the Duluth Superior Metropolitan Interstate Council, and for those who are not familiar with that, that is our local MPO planning organization, so they do these types of planning services for agencies in the MPO area. And of course, this is one of the more recent products that they were able to deliver, which was focused on the city of Proctor and all roads within the city of Proctor. That study was guided by the steering committee, which included representatives including Proctor residents, the city of Proctor reps, St. Louis County, I was the St. Louis County rep, and MnDOT. I just want to pull the vision statement. I typically don't read from my slides, but I'll just read it verbatim off the slide. Proctor's transportation system is a multimodal network. So a lot of key words here. I'll try to explain them. Multimodal, different modes of transportation: walking, biking, rolling, driving, trucks, passenger cars, all those sorts of things, right? It's a network, multimodal network connecting people and places, origins and destinations, providing safe, keyword safe, that's the first one, adjective, safe, healthy, accessible transportation choices for everyone, and promoting a sustainable and competitive economy. So that plan actually got granular enough to give specific recommendations for CASA 11 through the city back in 2021. And we're going to talk about those recommendations here, I believe, right now. Yep. So the two primary recommendations were, first, utilizing 2nd Street as part of the Munger Trail Spur. If you recall, there's been some discussions for many years between St. Louis County, City of Proctor, City of Hermantown, and the city of Duluth about the Munger Trail spur being routed through Hermantown and Proctor and ultimately back down to the Munger Trail itself. This plan recommended 2nd Street as a part of that route alignment through the city of Proctor. Okay, so thinking about 2nd Street, that's a clue, and then that clue is it would say this: it's more than just a pedestrian facility. We're looking at something maybe a little more robust. So if this is part of the Munger Trail spur, maybe it's a wider facility, maybe it's something that accommodates both pedestrians and bicyclists within the same facility, right? And then the second major recommendation was the 2nd Street streetscaping and multimodal improvements. And so specifically, if you look at the plan, it'll talk about these things, but some highlights that I think are worth noting. The curb extensions, which are these bump outs, these are you typically find at an intersection. When you come up to an intersection, sometimes we'll extend or bump out the curbs to make it a reduced crossing distance. Makes the pedestrian also more conspicuous to the drivers, pulls the pedestrian closer into the driver's cone of vision instead of them standing outside of that cone of vision. It also reduces that crossing distance so that there's less exposure for that pedestrian in a vehicle conflict. It actually recommends medians and pedestrian refuge islands, and this is independent of the rail crossing. Okay, this is something that was recommended from a traffic calming standpoint and also from a pedestrian crossing safety standpoint. It is certainly a proven countermeasure, having a median or a pedestrian refuge for pedestrians. And just to kind of quickly understand that, when you're a pedestrian and you're crossing, typically you have to find a simultaneous gap in both directions of traffic, whereas with a median you can simply cross one direction at a time, and it reduces the crossing distance for those pedestrians and also provides some traffic calming benefits. I'm going to throw in a bonus piece of information for you. So I was fortunate to be part of a transportation research project. I'm involved in many transportation research projects across the state. And this particular project asked the question, what we'll call it complete streets features actually result in traffic speeds going down? Like what works, okay? And there was 2 things that they found to work. The first, roundabouts, slowing down traffic within 500 feet or so of that intersection. And the second thing, raised medians. Those are the 2 things that were found to have the most impact, the most effect on driver speeds on an urban corridors, those 2 things thrown together. Talked about new infrastructure to accommodate bicycle traffic that would be related to the 2nd Street alignment for the Munger Trail spur. Lighting, street trees and landscaping. So that kind of gets into this topic of, if you look at 2nd Street specifically in the downtown area between US 2 and 5th Avenue, you'll see a lot of concrete, you'll see a lot of pavement, you'll see a lot of that kind of stuff. And so this plan is actually giving a recommendation of, is there a way to add some streetscaping elements to that specific corridor to make it look more like a urbanized street instead of a paved industrial section, okay? And then street amenities. So thinking about things like, does the city have a vision of benches and waste receptacles, especially if this becomes the Munger Trail spur through the city? Next slide. All right, switching gears a little bit. The rail crossing, controlled by 2 quadrant gates. That's a classic type of control that you see at a rail crossing in St. Louis County. This one actually includes 2 pedestrian gates because there's sidewalk on both sides of 2nd Street. It is currently operated as a quiet zone, and I have some breaking news, I suppose I could share this evening. And that breaking news is that based on literally days ago data updates from the CN Railroad, that quiet zone is now eligible to remain as is without any improvements. Key phrase, for now. For now, okay? I am giving you a suggestion that the city considers future-proofing that quiet zone so that when conditions change, and we would hope they do for the economy, what that means is more trains, right? More activity at the rail yard. That means things will change in the quiet zone calculation, and it could eventually become ineligible based upon changing circumstances. That's a difficult crystal ball to look into. I don't know. Neither does FRA, neither does the railroad, but they would know more than anyone, of course. One more thing on that quiet zone. So just so you understand how that works, there's a national threshold that's established for risk. It's a number, okay? So what that means is we don't want the risk of that crossing to be above this national threshold. In other words, it's like a performance metric of that we want it to perform at least this well, okay? If your crossing risk computation exceeds that national threshold, that's when the FRA would say it's not eligible. So today, it actually, without the train horns, it actually slightly below that national risk threshold, which means it remains eligible for now. Another thing to think about for rail crossings, and this is something a lot of people don't know, and that's totally okay. I don't know about a lot of things either. But MnDOT is the statutory authority for all rail crossings in the state. So what that means is all public at-grade crossings, city streets, township roads, county highways, state highways, MnDOT is the statutory authority. So they're the exclusive authority that has the ability to make required improvements or to approve those improvements. So whatever happens at that crossing, it isn't just based upon what the city thinks, what the county thinks. I got a little diagram on the upper right corner there. Those are really the partners that have to agree on something. And that means the CN has to agree, MnDOT has to agree, and the county has to agree because we're the road authority. And ultimately, the city would have to agree to some degree because if we're doing an improvement on 2nd Street, because it's a county-stated highway, there is something called municipal consent. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide. All right, rail crossing safety considerations. This is the last time I'm going to talk about the rail crossing. We're talking about the corridor at large here in a second. First, St. Louis County completed the first ever rail crossing safety plan in 2024. It's the first of its kind in the state. I initiated that effort in 2019. It took me a couple years to get it through and ultimately completed. And there was some delay in the process itself. There are 122 at-grade rail crossings on the county road system in St. Louis County. St. Louis County, interesting trivia, tied for Hennepin County with the total number of rail crossings in the state. And guess what? We're also tied with Hennepin County for the total number of crashes involving trains at rail crossings in the state. There is a direct one-to-one relationship. There's a direct one-to-one relationship, and I can show you the data if you'd like, between the number of crossings and the number of crashes at those crossings. Okay? Interesting tidbit, I didn't fill this in the slide, but from 1980 through 2010, nationally there was a reduction in the number of crossings in the national inventory, the same for the state. And there was a very nice correlation between the number of crossing crashes during that period of time. In 2010, it plateaued to nothing. There was no change. And the crashes plateaued. No change. It appears that the best strategy that we have of reducing rail crossing crashes is to remove the opportunity for drivers to be at the rail crossing. It appears that to be the case. Our experience in St. Louis County, out of the 122 at-grade crossings, we have 1 to 2 crashes per year on average. Okay? Half our crossings are controlled by signals and gates. Half our crossings are controlled by stop signs. Why do we care so much about crossings? That isn't a whole lot of crashes. The reason why we care so much about rail crossing safety is the potential for a serious outcome. If you are involved in a motor vehicle crash on the roadway system versus if you're involved in a crash at a rail crossing with a train, your chances of having a serious outcome increases by 16 times just because of the physics. The physics are not in our favor as drivers when we're crossing that rail line. We experience about 1 fatality at a rail crossing once every 5 years. This is also St. Louis County data. Signals, this is really interesting. Signals and gates do not eliminate crashes. This is one of the things that I really want to showcase on this slide tonight. And this came from the MnDOT Rail Safety Plan that was updated in 2015, which I was a part of the advisory committee for that. And it was this notion of, we used to think in Minnesota and nationally that the gold standard for rail crossing safety was simply putting in signals and gates. And then we could walk away and say, it's cured. It's not true. It's not true. When you compare signals and gates safety performance to crossing controlled by stop signs, there's only a 36% reduction in crashes. Only a 36% reduction. Not 80, not 90. I would think 90 or 100% because, I mean, you got flashing lights, you got a gate arm, you got a bell within the crossing equipment, right? You would think that alone, I mean, you have an obstruction. Guess what's happening? Drivers are driving around the gates. They're driving around the gates, okay? So this is not a TZD strategy. This is not a Towards Zero Death strategy, which pushed us to why we did the rail crossing safety plan in the first place. And oh, by the way, a side bonus piece of information, you'll see a lot more about this coming soon to a meeting near you, and that is the St. Louis County Rail Crossing Elimination Planning Project on Midway Road that we're actually beginning right now as we speak. So that objective is to eliminate both rail crossings on Midway Road and put in something different. Don't know what that is, but it's something different where there'll be no crossings on Midway Road anymore, okay? That'll take about 2 years to complete. Feel free to follow up with me if you have any more questions on that. So ultimately we need to balance rail crossing safety and function. One last thing, traffic function, we have to think about it from the network standpoint. What does CASA 11 do? Like, why does it exist? Okay, here's how my analogy for this. I own a pickup truck, and pickup trucks are really nice, especially on the weekends when I go to Menards and pick up some lumber, or go to the chicken feed store in Superior, Wisconsin, and pick up some chicken feed for my chickens. Very handy. Very expensive. Very expensive to have a pickup truck compared to other vehicles, right? So that's the function of that truck. Well, guess what? We have similar functions of the highway system. Midway Road's function is to move a lot of traffic. US 2's function is to move interstate traffic, right? That's why it exists. CASA 11 is a major collector. The function of CASA 11 is to collect traffic from all the local streets and deliver it to Midway Road and US 2. That's the function of the roadway. That's the function of the corridor, okay? So we have to think about this, not just necessarily about an intersection or a driveway or a segment. We have to think about it from a network standpoint. What is this ultimately trying to function and designate it as? The second thing is designated as a county state aid highway, which means we receive state aid funds to maintain that system in St. Louis County. We have about 800 miles approximately of county state aid highways in the county. And the intention really on our county state aid highway system is to move higher volumes of traffic and to support truck traffic. That's kind of the intention of the system. It's like a secondary trunk highway system is really what the county state aid highway system is for. So this last thought is we have to manage access to preserve its function and to improve safety. Back to my pickup truck analogy, we can go to the next slide. My pickup truck analogy would be like somebody saying, Vic, we're going to take all your leaf springs out and you can't haul anything anymore. But you still can drive it. You just can't use it as a pickup truck. Well, why would I have it as a pickup truck? Same thing with our functionally classified roadways. Why would we have all that money invested in those functionally classified roadways if we can't use them as functionally classified roadways? As a taxpayer investment, the taxpayers are supposed to be getting something out of that funding, and that is the function. All right, enough of my little diatribe there. All right, so looking at CASA 11, the roadway improvements, we had a project planned for 27 we had a project plan in 27 in response to the quiet zone potentially going bye-bye. And what we did is we were willing to move up that section of 2nd Street, pull it out of a larger project that was programmed in 2031, still programmed in 2031. The idea was to accelerate just the section of 2nd Street between 5th Avenue and US 2 so that we could preserve the quiet zone for the city. It would also, like I said, better manage access That is an access management strategy, raised medians. We're doing that on other county roadways across the county. And it also is a pedestrian crossing safety improvement. I mentioned that earlier. And this project includes new street lighting and new sidewalk with streetscaping, landscaping changes. And that street lighting, FYI, that's intended to be corridor street lighting along 2nd Street. And what St. Louis County does with our city partners is we are willing to pay for the design and construction of a corridor lighting system if the city is willing to own it and accept it and maintain it afterwards. So there's no cost to the city to own, to construct. The only in-kind contribution for the city is to accept it, own it, operate it, maintain it when it's completed. So we actually have a contract with SEH ready to go on that when we want to. Now, because of the quiet zone update and news item, we are going to delay that project from 27 to 2031. So it kind of gives us a little bit of relief in the sense of MnDOT's project on Highway 2. We don't have a competitive detour system happening. Also gives us a little bit more time to think more higher level, holistically, which brings me to my next slide, which is we are planning to complete a corridor planning process. We call these a corridor study. I am completing one as we speak for Midway Road up in the Pike Lake area. We completed one a couple years ago for 40th Avenue West, which we're implementing through a construction project this summer and next summer. We completed one up in Aurora, Casal 100, which is their 3rd Avenue Main Street through downtown Aurora. That's actually being constructed this summer. And these corridor studies are effective not only from the standpoint of getting a better agreement on what the actual recommendations are, but also funding, securing funding. Our corridor study in Aurora has been securing some funding for us up there for a state earmark, for example. All right, so what the corridor study will do and what it looks like, it will document existing conditions, issues, needs, and values. So it'll ask people, what do you want this section to look like? I apologize, we can go back one slide. So one thing I like to do with these corridor study initial meetings is I'll say to the folks who are attending, I don't encourage you to do this any other time in your life, but tonight I want you to complain. I want you to complain tonight. Why? Because we're not going to understand what the issues are unless you tell us. Okay, so tell us all the problems. You got 5, 10, 20 years of experience driving this corridor, walking this corridor. Tell us about it, okay? That's the first wave of this thing, is to document all those issues. Then also talk about values. Like, what do you want this to be? What should it be? What are your desires for this section? We have a robust engagement process, which we specifically reach out and create stakeholder groups. We think about businesses, we think about general public, we think about the agencies that are involved. City of Proctor, of course, being part of that state agency stakeholder group. We want to think about the Proctor Transportation Plan. There's a lot of good ideas in there. There's a lot of reasons for those ideas. We want to think about incorporating those into this corridor study. It ultimately develops alternatives, develops a final recommendation with consideration of utility replacements to ultimately create the final deliverable, which is a final layout that everyone can see and say, this is what the product is after 1.5 to 2 years of effort. That'll be used to brought into final design that'll be constructed at a later date. So what we're planning on then is that the Casal 11 corridor, that solid line on that map at the beginning of the presentation, would be delivered as a reconstruction project in 2031. But we would work up towards that point over the next couple of years through this corridor study process so that we can get a better understanding of what that project will be at the end of the day. Next slide. Things that we will definitely be hitting on for themes in this corridor study. We're going to be talking about streetscaping. We're going to talk about lighting. Improved pedestrian and bicycle facilities, especially this is a safe route to school route to the Proctor High School Middle School. The city did, in my opinion, a great job on reconstructing the 2nd Street segment that the city owns between 5th Avenue over to the high school. Let's continue that connection. Let's do a plug and play kind of approach here and get that connection back over to Boundary Avenue with the park. I think it's called Plain Park at Boundary Avenue. We want to think about traffic calming. We want to think about access management. rail crossing safety improvements, of course, and look at intersections. Are the intersections controlled appropriately? Should it be Cypress Street stop, always stop? I don't know. I threw the Toward Zero Death banner on there because we're a Toward Zero Death county. What that means is that we believe traffic fatalities are unacceptable. Whether you're a pedestrian, bicyclist, or a driver, or a passenger, we believe those are unacceptable. This whole study is based under the banner of safety, and my little tagline there, safety is always proactive, or if not, it's just not active. And then that brings me to the end. Appreciate your generosity and my time. Happy to answer.
Frankhorn didn't even interrupt you.
Yes. Happy to answer any questions. Appreciate the consideration. And one last thing, I apologize. I'm not asking for any action. I'm not asking for any approvals tonight. Just want to give you an update on where we are. So thank you for that.
Council have any questions? Councilor Benson.
On one of the maps, when you're talking about the number 11 corridor recommendations, and there's the little photo off to the right, and it looks like a little blue bus emblem in the intersection of Highway 2 and 2nd Street.
Yep.
Is,
Yeah. So if you go down there, you see the bus emblem at the intersection 2 and 2nd, yes.
so does the bus, that little blue thing, what does that mean?
I think that is an error. I don't know why it would show a bus stop there. It perhaps might be, I'd have to look at the legend. It might be looking at it from the standpoint of it's an enhanced pedestrian crossing because of the traffic signal. Or it might be considering like a future bus stop that could be considered with the DTA, but I'm not aware of that being an active bus stop today.
There was a bus stop there at one time.
Yes.
No, I think that's changed.
Then it moved up to 2nd.
This is actually
Mayor, I do have a question. Thanks for the good news on the FRA crossing information, the flash news, but how often do they analyze those, the crossing?
When the data needs to be updated is when they're supposed to. So as operations change, the railroads are supposed to be proactive enough to actually update the database. I think what ended up happening here is the conversation pushed them to say, we better check to make sure that's updated, and still they did. So it's like, we have databases at the county that we're supposed to be updating. We do our best, but sometimes they lax. Unacceptably, but sometimes we do.
So with this reprieve, with the quiet zone, we should not take this as a forever thing, that we should begin to be proactive and come up with a resolution just in case train activity does increase?
Yeah, that's my recommendation is that's why I use the phrase future proofing, because conditions may change, and if they do, if we think about it this way, there's kind of two options. There's one option we can sit on our hands, which is totally legitimate, it's called the do nothing option. And if things change, we may get caught unawares and be like, oops, I wish we knew this 2 years in advance so we could plan something. Or, oops, we're 2 years past the reconstruction project in 2031. We didn't do anything at that time in 2031. Now we're back in the same situation that we were here in 2026. So one of the ways that we can look at this is the standpoint of, do we want to be future-proofing it? In other words, being proactive to say, if we were to have certain safety measures constructed as part of that future project in 2031, that may reduce that risk of it ever becoming a question again.
Thank you.
Mayor, Mr. Lund, what you're saying is St. Louis County recommends doing medians. Is that what you guys are?
I would say it is something that we need to seriously look at. I don't want to prejudge the corridor study. Again, there's other things at play here. There's the pedestrian aspect, there's the traffic calming aspect, there's the streetscaping aspect, right? I think it needs to be seriously evaluated and considered. It is definitely a proven safety strategy for rail crossing safety, and we are definitely all about rail crossing safety. It's a proven safety countermeasure for pedestrian safety. We're the same for that too. So we'll have to look at the corridor study.
And when would you need to know if so a couple years prior to the project.
Yeah, so appreciate that question. I should have gone into a little more depth on that. Municipal consent. So in state statute, there's a municipal consent provision that requires, anytime there's an improvement on a county state highway within a city limit, the county and MnDOT are supposed, and this would be on the trunk highway system, are supposed to acquire municipal consent from that city for those improvements. MnDOT's a little bit different because if it's safety driven, they do not need municipal consent. So they could put a roundabout and say it's a safety driven project and that's what we're doing without municipal consent. They can do that. That is not provided through the county. So the county, regardless if it's safety driven, regardless if it's just capacity driven, the counties have to receive municipal consent. That is why the quarter study is so valuable, is because you guys are kept in the loop at the same time as we're kept in the loop. I like to say we all get to watch the sausage getting made. Instead of me coming to you at the 9th hour or the 11th hour and saying, please approve this without you ever looking at this and understanding how we got there. Let's actually bring you into the process, bring you into the kitchen. Let's all make the sausage together. So that when we come to that point, there's no question because you guys have been a part of that process. So that's why it's such a valuable process. Is it gives you that ability to be involved and shape and craft the outcome. When will we be starting it is the question. It'll take us 3 to 4 or 5 months to get a consultant on board. So I would say this winter is when I think the earliest when we could see some activity on that. And
Vic.
again, it's about a 1.5 to 2 year process.
The city council just went through the process of the Highway 2 municipal consent, and they had the option to waive municipal consent for that project. Is that, not that I'm an advocate of that, but
No.
will they be given that opportunity?
Not
this
for the
project?
county system. It's written differently than the MnDOT's municipal consent statute language. It's a different statute chapter altogether. It says city shall. So what that means is when we submit the plan to the state aid division of MnDOT, they're the ones that actually approve the plan at the end of the day. It meets the standards, it meets the funding requirements. They're going to say, we can't assign this plan until we have a resolution from the city. So there is no option for the city to say, I mean, you could say, I mean, it's the same thing as saying waive it, just say pass it. You know, same thing.
Sure.
Any other questions?
So, I mean, so our, what we voted on is basically null and void now, because we have to redo it.
Yeah, and right now our quiet zone is good.
Yeah,
So I think we wait till they put their study together. We get to play a part in that.
and maybe that will give us a little more, a better view of maybe in a couple of years if the railroad decides to check it again, or how long, you know.
No, awesome presentation
Thank you,
and
sir.
great news. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
The 2 ladies behind you are very happy right now, so.
Rarely do I get that news.
All right, moving on, we'll go to 5A, legislative agenda. Any updates on that, Counselor Benson? That you'd like to share?
No, been pretty quiet, and everybody's in election mode, and, you know, for the House and the Senate and governor. And I think Proctor had its first governor candidate come through last week, so ramping up.
Sounds good, lots of parades.
Yes.
Thank you. 5B, project labor agreement implementation. Any updates on that, or I think during our pre-agenda meeting, we discussed that we would draft something up and present it in 2 meetings from now? Is that what you said?
Yeah, well,
Either next meeting or 2 meetings from now, at the latest, right?
maybe 3.
Maybe 3, okay. Council good with that? Any discussion? Hearing none. We'll move to 6A. St. Louis County Cooperative Agreement 2027 chip seal. Is there a motion to approve the cooperative agreement with St. Louis County?
So moved.
Councilor Peterson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor DeWall. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. 6B, opioid remediation fund request. I don't know why I can't say that word, but here we are. Is there a motion to approve the purchase of the 908 device at the cost of $16,450 for the PD? Counselor DeWall made the motion. Is there a second? Second by Counselor Johnson. Any further discussion?
Mayor, how much do we have in that opioid fund right now? 50 plus, so that would not only take care of the initial, it could take care of quite a few years of.
That's why I kind of emphasized after 12 or 2 years, we need to reassess it. Eventually that money will run out. So your department, as a department head, you'll have to work with the chief and determine the value, and you'll have some chance to use it. Hopefully, I hope you don't have to use it, but I'm assuming you will use it, and it'll give you enough chance to say, yeah, this is valuable or no. Yes, sir.
And I'd just like to add that if by chance this doesn't qualify as one of those expenditures, I think you said earlier that other departments have used it for these funds, purchased this device with those funds.
Yeah, that was a conversation Officer Bradley had with some of the other departments that were at his training, and that's kind of how he came up with the idea. That's how they had started using the funds elsewhere.
By chance, if we get denied on it, want to bring it back to council, or what do we want to do on that? Go ahead.
Are you talking about the permission to use the funds? As long as you stay within this, the uses, the parameters?
Right,
you
but
don't
if
need
they
to-
say, nope, that doesn't qualify.
You don't need to go to anyone
Oh,
for
okay,
approval.
okay.
You have the discretion as long as you believe it's in the parameters of the
Perfect.
uses.
Perfect, so no one's telling us yea or
No,
nay? Okay.
you are setting the standard for that.
Cool. I'm good then. Any other discussion?
I just want to say 2 things. One is anytime we can make it so our officers are safer on the job, I'm definitely for, especially using those funds to combat the drug problem that we all face, and not just Proctor, but nationwide. And 2, now that I know that if there's more than one police officer that comes, they're going to ask for money.
It's usually a good sign. Any other discussion on that? Megan, did we have a vote on that yet?
No.
No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thanks, Megan. 6C, Resolution 18-26, a resolution accepting grant navigator funding. Is there a motion to approve Resolution number 18-26?
So moved.
Counselor Benson made the motion. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 6D, IRRB resolution. Counselor Benson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mayor. Hopefully, everybody had an opportunity to read the resolution. Because of the news tonight, we could perhaps slow down the process, but I still think it's important that at least we go through the process. Consider asking perhaps the IRRB after January, when new board gets seated. As we go through here, if you noticed, we talk about the 4-quad gate system at 500,000. Probably took the low end as opposed to the $1 million one. Did not include the median in this resolution. And that's probably the gist of it. And also, the rail-related deaths, I would incorporate the new information that we got from Mr. London to that paragraph. But other than that, I guess I stand for any questions.
And I would agree with you, Counselor Benson, that although the IRRB is a great funding source for those communities that reside within their boundaries, I would feel more comfortable presenting a resolution to them, maybe once we can have a discussion, slow the process down, like you said. So I would be in favor of tabling this for another day.
I think the arguments are there for us. And if we do have to ultimately go to the state for help, at least we could say we tried.
Well, we learned today that MnDOT oversees all railroad crossings, so. Right on. Any other discussion on that by council?
No, we'll just, do I guess just one thing, Mayor and Councilor, is we should continue to try to have open discussions with the IRRB to open that line of communication to see where we can maybe go in the future.
I know there's a labor BA that's meeting with Bobby Joe Champion here shortly. Just saying. Any other discussion? Hearing none? All right. Bring us to 6E, Resolution 19-26. This is a resolution appointing election judges. Is there a motion to approve resolution number 19-26?
So moved.
Councilor Benson made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Peterson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to 7A, closed session. This portion of the meeting will be closed as permitted by Minnesota State Statute Section 13D.03 to consider labor negotiations. Is there a motion to go into closed session? I'll make a motion to go into closed session at 6:48. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes.
that you got hit in the face by.
All right, we'll resume the regular council meeting, and that'll bring us to 7A. I'll entertain a motion to offer the top candidate the finance director position as directed in closed session. Is there a motion to approve that? Councilor DeWalt made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? I'll go ahead and make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Sent by Councilor Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Brings us to members' concerns. Councilor Peterson.
I just want to thank the fire department and police department for the phenomenal job they've done in the past month and prior to that, but especially with the 4th of July.
Thank you. Councilor DeWall. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
Nothing.
Thank you. Councilor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to also congratulate the police department. They did some extraordinary things that I was able to witness. Don't want to single anybody out, but top shelf, real proud of them. Want to congratulate the South St. Louis County Fair. Put on a nice show, except for the rain, which nobody has control over. And just to remind everyone of the community picnic that's coming up next week.
Got that off my list. Thank you, Councilor. Same thing here. Chief Helquist reported earlier today that the second quarter they had 178 total calls, 31 of them being fire. And for the year, they've had a total of 357 total calls. Comparison to last June, they were at 315, so they're well above that mark. And 0 missed calls this quarter so far. So congratulations to the fire department. They work hard and put in the time, so good job. One other reminder, election of city council seats and the mayor's seat. So I will be filing for re-election. Other than that, got nothing else. City.
Actually do, Mayor. This meeting happened today, but we had a pre-construction meeting for the Kingsbury Creek Restoration Project. And a construction, they're waiting on some MPCA permits for construction. I want to warn you and the community that in the construction meeting, we talked about how the biggest concern that comes up during these restoration projects, and the crew put it best. They said this is stream surgery. So just like when you go into surgery and you come out and things look really bad at first, but as things heal, it's much better. It's going to look, the streamscape is going to look drastically different during construction, but not to worry. After it heals and comes back better with the right species of plants, shrubs, and things that are needed for it. So just to put you on warning that it could be shocking for the community as they start.
Above the scope of the project.
Yeah, we did talk about that at the meeting, and since they had to break the stream restoration and the green infrastructure up in 2 projects, and actually the planting is not going to happen until next year, we're going to let them restore the stream, see what we have to work with for recreation trails, park amenities, and then go.
Deal with some litigation on Lake Shoreline.
Yeah.
It's coming from the same, but just so people understand, like Mr. Rich mentioned, it looked radical at first.
Yeah, it's today when we were watching the project, there are giant willow and elm trees that are not native to the stream. They're very large and they're very old, but they have to go because it's being detrimental to the stream right now. This is why we're in the situation. And then we also talked about the plant shrubbery. Everything has a 3-year look back period that they'll monitor. And we talked about developing a plan that the city of Proctor can help with from the year 3 and on of how to keep the stream maintained so we don't get in the position that we're in right now with just yearly cutting back, yearly maintenance, things that we can do as a city parks rec street functions to keep the stream where it's at instead of getting back to the we'll develop a plan as well. It's going to be a great project.
Yeah, it'd be exciting to watch. Anything else on that, Council?
Was it just the general that walked it, or did they have stuff with?
Just a general.
Attorney Hanka. Thank you. Looking for a motion to pay the bills in the amount of $451,878.09. Motion by Councilor Peterson. Is there a second? Sent by Councilor Benson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Councilor DeWall made a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.